Welcome to the Dance NYC 2021 Symposium. We will be with you shortly. Tonight, we present our keynote conversation, Starting Again, a system built for us. Accessibility. ASL interpretation and live captioning will be provided for today's session. A stream-to-text link will be posted in the chat for access to the live transcriptions. We will take a 5-minute break during this session. Stay connected with us by posting your takeaways on social media using the hashtags DanceSymp, DanceNYC2021, DanceSymp2021, at Instagram, at dance.nyc, at Twitter, at dance.nyc, and at Facebook at dance/NYC. Community guidelines. Based on Dance NYC's values of justice, equity, and inclusion, we agree to share our opinions, challenge perspectives, and engage or debate respectfully, and acknowledge and course correct if harm is caused. Honor everyone's personhood and humanity. Not tolerate speech that is disparaging, abusive, violent, or that is intended to defame someone's character publicly. Don't forget to check out the 2021 Symposium digital program book with curated thematic guides. Tomorrow's agenda includes 10:15 a.m. Welcome and Wake Up. 10:30 a.m. our morning sessions begin. At 12 o'clock, we take our lunch break. And at 1 p.m., our afternoon sessions begin. At 2:30 p.m., we'll take a short break. And at 2:45, join us for the daily debrief. Move your bodies at 3:45 for our dance break. And at 4:15, visit our virtual expo showcase. Lastly, at 5:30, we will have our keynote conversation. We are happy to be in community with you. Thanks for joining.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Eduardo Valero, and I'm the Artistic Director and CEO of Ballet Hispanico. My pronouns are he, his, and him, and I identify as a non-disabled, queer, brown, Latinx man from Cuba. I'm wearing a black shirt and have on turtle shell glasses, and my background is a gray room. On my right-hand side is a white door with a picture hanging on it of dancers in red silhouette. And on my left side, I have a beautiful picture by Puerto Rican artist De Diego of Ballet Hispanico with a woman and hands with castanets. I have been working and living on Lenapehoking territory. For those just joining us, please visit our land acknowledgement on the agenda page and lift up the indigenous lands you are currently on in the chart. I want to start us with a moment of silence. We want to acknowledge the violence that has occurred against the Asian American community, many of whom are immigrants, and that this has happened after a year of continuous xenophobia and systemic failures exacerbated by COVID-19. We stand firmly in support of the well-being and safety of our Asian American dance colleagues and continue to champion the role that dance can play to foster the inclusion, integration, and human rights in the New York City metropolitan area. Thank you, gracias, for joining us for the completely digital 2021 Symposium held on the WOVA platform. As we are at the mercy of technology, we want to remind you that there may be delays, sound issues, and changing circumstances that may occur during our time together. We invite you to extend us and each other grace and patience. Second, an ASL interpreter from LC Interpreting Services and closed captioning services provided by the Viscardi Center will be available throughout the keynote. We will also post speaker information in the description below and under the speakers module on the left side of your WOVA web app or the menu of your WOVA mobile app. This information is also available on our website. Third, feel free to post questions or comments you want to share with the community in the chat section to the right of this event room. Dance NYC moderators will be interacting with you in the chat audience. There will not be dedicated time for Q&A during this discussion, but there will be a keynote follow-up chat in the community section of WOVA if you wish to continue the conversation. Lastly, we hope you will help us to amplify these conversations. Repost, tag us, and share your takeaways on Twitter @DanceNYC, Instagram @dance.nyc, and Facebook dance/NYC using the hashtag #DanceSymp. That's SYMP at the end. So many of you know the symposium this year is organized into tracks around its themes: justice, transformation, education. All of the sessions you heard today were a part of the justice track, which focused on recentering certain voices in the dance field and about dance's relationship to justice-related movements. Tonight's keynote takes us from that space into thinking about transformation and the process of change. In essence, identifying the pathways towards making change in our dance spaces, our creative practices, and our funding processes, and our larger societies by way of incorporating those justice-related learnings. To that end, we are going to experience a short video from Dance Rising NYC's 5-borough video tour, Still Dancing, that marks the 1-year anniversary of New York City's cultural shutdown due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Dance Rising is a grassroots collective formed last fall as an urgent response to the pandemic. Dance Rising NYC is a platform for embodied advocacy that affirms the importance of dance in all its forms. This week, screens across New York City are broadcasting videos from Dance Rising's Fall 2020 dance outs, bringing visibility to the dance industry while live performance remains on pause. And now I have the pleasure of introducing tonight's keynote, Starting Again, a System Built for Us. This keynote poses the questions, how do we build a world where dance and movement are the building blocks and where Black, Indigenous, people of color artists and disabled artists are centered and supported, and where ableism is dismantled? What is the origin story of that world? And how do we enact it in this present? What would we have to change structurally for dance work to be understood and resourced to actually thrive? Turning you over to our moderator for today's discussion, Nycha Whitson, interdisciplinary artist.
Thank you, Dance NYC, for having me and for hosting this discussion. Thank you to all of the panelists that are here. As I'm hoping for us to be in a conversation of otherwise world making, I'm going to turn to a book that I've been reading called The Jazz of Physics. And I'm going to randomly turn to a page and see if there's some life that it can offer us as we think about jazzing a new world. I had taken a risk. It had been a bit like realizing in the middle of a jazz solo that the moment called for a deliberate wrong note. As one of my jazz teachers once said, you practice all these scales, exercises, and long tones so that in the middle of a solo, when you play that wrong note, like an acrobat, you'll know how to fail. I had decided to play some wrong notes in my research, fell and learned a hell of a lot in the process. So maybe we think about what the poetics of failure are, the poetics of improvisation in our world making, and have that as a space to open. I'm Nycha Whitson. Just to introduce myself again, my pronouns are they, them. I'm a Black, queer, non-binary, trans artist and futurist. I am currently on Erie, I'm going to read it, Kaskia and Mississauga land. On Cleveland, Ohio, colonially known, and where I was born. I have been managing some chronic pain and low mobility. So I have my cane with me that has a shiny handle. It's wooden. I'm wearing an extra large fedora, and I'm wearing a blue button-up shirt that has white and lavender polka dots. I'm excited to be with you all today, and I want to invite this incredible esteemed panel that I'm excited to learn from to do the same and introduce themselves. We'll learn more about what their works are as we're in discussion together. And I'll pass it off to someone and ask for you to pass it to another. Claudia, will you begin?
Sure. Thank you, Nycha. Thank you, Dance NYC. Hola, buenas tardes. My name is Claudia Norman. I'm an independent producer, creative producer, I call. I'm a founder and director of the Mexico Now Festival, former artistic director of the Latino Cultural Festival, and founded partner of the Generators, which is a new company creating to produce innovative programs with the global perspective. I'm a member of a recently found SIPA, and also a part of a recently committee created NAPAMA called the Mexico Committee. I am, you can, the pronounce is she, her, hers. I was born and raised in Mexico City. I'm right now calling or connecting with you from Jackson Heights, Queens, the land, original land of the Matinicock. I'm a brown, light-skinned woman with dark, short hair, wearing a white shirt with red dots and wearing red earrings. And behind me, you can see two green plants, a white wall. And so I'm passing the introduction. Kevin.
Hi, my name is Kevin Gotkin. I use he or they pronouns. I am a white, queer, disabled, chronically ill, non-binary bebe. I am on Lenapehoking, also known as Brooklyn. Right now I'm wearing a black hoodie, a light pink beanie, I have a mustache, and just a light zhuzh with the accessories, a very thin chain and a dangly earring. In the background, the sun is working spectacularly on some bookshelves, and there's some plants as well. And I will pass it to Linda.
Hi, everyone. My name is Linda Kuo. My pronoun is she, her, hers. I am Taiwanese American, non-disabled woman, and I am currently joining the meeting from the Lenape land near Princeton, New Jersey. By the time this will be aired, I will be back in the Kingdom of Hawaii, or Hawaii, as most of you call it. My background is a white wall with a poster of a jazz band painting. And I am a East Asian woman with light skin and long black hair. And I'm wearing a beige sweater with some black, I guess, dots mixed in it. Yeah, and I am the director and also choreographer for Dancers Unlimited. We are a bi-coastal dance company based in Honolulu, Hawaii, and also New York City. I am Asian American, born in Taipei, Taiwan, and grew up in Honolulu, Hawaii. And yeah, I'm passing the introduction to Perel.
Hi, I'm Perel. My pronouns are they, them. I am speaking from Berlin, Germany, where it is nighttime. And you can't tell by just the very sparse white-walled background, but there is a full moon that's coming in through my window in the other room. And Berlin has plenty oppressive histories that affect my lineage and many lineages here. It's possibly a native place of the Sami. I am wearing a leather shirt. I have bleached hair, and I have my cane, which has a shiny black handle and a chrome body. I'm an independent artist and performer, and I will now invite Ahimsa.
Thank you, Sego. My name is Ahimsa Timoteo Bodhrán. I am calling in today from Tulsa, Oklahoma, which is the intersection of Muskogee, Cherokee, and Osage territory, and also the intersection of the Greenwood District, a historical African-American neighborhood that 100 years ago was the site of the Tulsa Race Massacre, and that we're experiencing the centennial of this year. So at the intersection of Native and African territories here. Myself, I am fourth generation South Bronx. I come from a multi-generational mixed race family that's as Native as it is Latinx, as African, as Arab, as European as it is, that keeps on mixing with the next generations also being Asian and more African descent. I'm queer, I'm trans, I'm a survivor of violence. I am someone who has not identified recently as a person with disabilities, but has been dealing with chronic health issues very intensely this past year and revisiting what that means. I use male pronouns usually, and then in queer trans people of color spaces that are loving, I welcome all pronouns. And then in terms of a description of myself visually, I have long hair, I'm light skinned, I'm wearing glasses, I have a goatee and beard, I'm wearing a t-shirt, and my background is a virtual background, a visual art background, which I took a photo of one building in Manhattan and then replicated it. So it's like multiple layers of it because it reminded me that one building looking like beadwork. So the illumination of the building and the darkened windows are different shades of blue into brown, into black, into yellow. And in terms of the work I do in the world, I'm a multimedia artist, critic, organizer, and educator. And it's really good to be here with everyone today. And then I believe that's all our panelists. So I think I would handle it to Nycha for continuing.
Thank you, Ahimsa. Thank you, all you wonders, for the introductions. We're going to step into this. The Wi-Fi where I am is a little spotty, so if you need me to repeat or slow down, please let me know. I'm happy to do so. I'm going to ask if you feel safe or comfortable where you are to close your eyes as we time travel into the future, into 2035. And maybe we travel by the light of the moon where Perel is, that full illuminated moon that will move and propel us past where we are, through the cosmos, through our fantasies and constructions, through our warrior work on front lines, through our dance work in studios and beyond, through our performance work, through our wrestlings and ruminations, opening spaces, traveling ourselves past what we know into what we are becoming. And begin to imagine yourself, actually begin to transport yourself there and feel your body in this place. The terrain, maybe the noise or the quiet, the beings around you, the nature. How are you there? How is your art there? How is your making there? How is your community there? Who are your communities there? What is with you? Who is with you? Consider this world in 2035 that you're in, and as an artist and being that you have strived to co-cultivate liberated worlds, what now does this world look like? Now that your most delicious, fantastical constructions have had their way, what is this world? And as you open your eyes, let's share that world back with each other. Linda, can you begin talking about the world that we're in now? What is this system built for us? What's here?
Yeah, I think the moonlight kind of brought me back, I guess, to the beach, where I think the waters connect everybody, and we are creating, I guess, with each other without the boundaries and barriers, with better understanding of each other's experiences, or having also lived through shared experiences. We are better connected with our ancestors. We're creating not just with what we normally would consider as a professional dancer, but dance is now a part of everyone's life, where it's essential for healing, for moving forward, for building futures.
Thank you. And we can rock this conversationally. Anyone feeling moved to speak?
So, hi, this is Claudia. In 2035, I transport into a place that is basically having two things. One is a place with a democratic culture, where somebody like me enters into a room like here and speaks to colleagues like you, and hear your stories and the story of others, and that makes feel comfortable to that person sharing, to express freely and be able to be present and visible. And the second thing is to look back and remember this time as the era of the Renaissance, when everything stopped and we were remembered as a generation that had the chance to deconstruct a system of oppression and question new forms and suggest new ways of interacting and interconnect in order to elevate our own practices. So that's what I see the 235 to talk about the present, but not forget about the past, and to bring it on those who had built the road for us in new presence. Thank you.
Thank you.
For me, when I think about 2035, I think about how in the multiracial movement from at least the 90s, when I was coming on up into present, Like we were always predicting this multiracial future when the US would again be a people of color majority country. And so wondering, like, and the guesstimates were around 2040. So maybe it occurs a few years earlier. And with that, I feel at almost any historical moment in our movements and struggles, we're on the cusp of something wonderful and transformative and something apocalyptically horrible. And so wondering, when we're thinking about other situations like such as South Africa, where you have, had majority people of color spaces that are still in increasingly white minority dominated, like white supremacist structures, like what would be the struggles of an increasingly racially diverse US that is increasingly rebrowning and re-blacking and re-redding and all the different race, re-racializations that are occurring, and how tightly, or maybe transformatively transforming and resisting that, like where is white supremacy at that moment, So hopefully, racially, it's this beautiful, magical wonderland that we've been dreaming of. And then similarly on another level, we're looking at demographics and how as we increasingly decolonize on multiple levels, and like also looking at how much younger folk are feeling safe to come out as queer and trans, or somewhere along a gender or sexuality spectrum. And so wondering like what that queer and trans continuum future will be, in which perhaps the majority of youth are feeling comfortable to admit that gender is a construct that we can live within and play with and fuck with, and can be beautiful, and our desires can be diverse and fluid. And it'd just be wonderful to see where we're at in terms of things, and how do we live in solidarity with each other. And the last thing I'll say is, like, while we always are thinking about like environmental apocalypse, it's also really beautiful to see animals coming back. Like animals have returned to the Bronx and returned to New York City, and there's all these things that are occurring. And so I really love to think about what could be vibrant, beautiful environmental futures, and if the other beings from the other parts of the multiverse to choose to announce themselves, or we reveal that we have our cosmic neighbors. And I'm ready for like the Star Trek, beautiful Michael Burnham future. Like I'm ready, take me to like the next millennium and let's like do some good cosmic stuff. So that's the hope, that's the goal, that's the dream. And I'm done.
What a wonderful invitation, yes. Kevin, can you share your world ruminations?
Yeah, this is Kevin. Well, before I think about where I just went, I do just want to signal one thing I've noticed in the very powerful facilitation technique of dreaming, which is really helpful in a lot of the work that I do, because in disability organizing, one of the things we run up against is the imagination of compliance and the law, and things that are rooted in a rights tradition that are actually really hard to imagine beyond. So dreaming beyond all of that is super helpful. But one thing I've learned is that for some folks, that the kind of imagination of a future is really difficult. And I just want to signal that, like, if anyone is like listening to this and there's like, for example, maybe my experience of my disability includes a sense of foreshortened future for myself, especially right now. It's like it just remains very abstract and hard, maybe. So I just want to say, if anyone is experiencing that right now in our audience, just to, I'm breathing with you. But it was really evocative where I went, because I landed in 2035 in the club. And I was like, the club looks completely different, because it looks a lot more like a living room. And there's always couches, and this like distinction between the spaces that we've been spending in, let's say, the 2020s inside, have now kind of elaborated beautifully. And there's these forms of movement and dance that are like really evolving rapidly right in front of your face. And so, yeah, for me, the 2035 is a moment of like, nightlife artistry has never been so amazing. And we danced in the aisles of supermarkets when there was like a good track on and this was our club. We did that for a while, and now finally release back into the spaces that can cultivate access and can cultivate forms of artistry that we could only imagine.
Thank you for that, Kevin. And what you brought up, I think is important for me to also contextualize. I realize I didn't say this. I think of dream work as the kind of balancing energy to our resistance work, and that definitely for folks experiencing oppressions and multiple oppressions, it is work that gets muffled by white supremacy and all of its manifestations, right? It's something that is tried to be oppressed out of us. So thinking of dreaming as a practice, how we engage in that, I think opens up some things and our inner landscapes, our organizing landscapes that also combat white supremacy, right? They don't maybe look the same as some other forms, but I think they're forms that feel like on the underside, perhaps, of resistance, other kinds of resistance work. So thank you for calling that in. Perel, will you share a world?
Yeah, and actually, speaking to what you just said, Nycha, that thinking about access and the futurity of access and dream work as a balance of resistance work, the futurity of access is like a space where nurturing is not only honored, but a form of power. And so it is this structure or vessel that is living underneath everything we are and everything we express. And I just want to echo back some of the things that I heard everyone say and elaborate a little bit from a disability standpoint, I guess. When Linda said that she imagined a future of being better connected with our ancestors, I also imagined that by 2035, I will have had to let go of and bury a lot of people whom I love. And so they will then become ancestors. Then they will become holders of lineage, of disabled lineage. And actually what I dream of as I recover disability history where I am is that that there's a connection between the past and the present that is not so separate, that our ancestors can be with us at the party that Kevin throws, as much as us in our corporeal forms. So there's that. And then Claudia said, have a chance to deconstruct a system of oppression, to elevate each other's practice, and to cultivate a new presence. And there's something about that where I feel like this new kind of presence needs to be one that is not anymore about the individual, and not anymore about scarcity mentality of competition, and that that type of ethos is the result of a white supremacist, misogynist, and ableist system. And so what does a future look like with real interdependence? And even when the work that we create is collaborative in a new way, and the resources that we are able to cultivate is occurring in collaboration with the earth and with each other, where we see value in things that before we have not, in bodies that before we have not, in identities that before we have exploited. And then Ahimsa spoke about this edge where the transformational can also become or look like be apocalyptic. And I feel like CRIPS, which is, or DIS, CRIP and DIS being the colloquial terms that disabled people use to describe ourselves, we know that transformation, apocalypse dance extremely well, living on the edge of life for many reasons that have to do with health and with systemic oppression, that you almost can't have one without the other. So what is it to dance no matter what? Like, what is it to dance in an apocalypse in which you yourself might lose your form, but in which you know there's a future where transformation will occur?
Perel, I see that when we get to the point that we understand that we live in communities that are constantly changing, where immigration, colonization, slavery, displacement are part of the human history, and it's part of our common present. So there is, here we are all connected by all this past history and sharing our own present experience. But I think, to me, the most important part is that sharing these experiences, as we are doing today here with this this panel and this opportunity to have this conversation with you, I think is, to me, to listen to this experience and thinking about 2035, it would be, to me, wonderful, as I say, to just be remembered, as the Renaissance time, the COVID time as the Renaissance time, when we finally saw artists as part of global citizenship in our societies. So this is not like a separate group of people with, we are part of a community and we are part of this society, and we have to, and that's kind of like the opportunity I see today, that we have to change how we interact.
Claudia and Perel, you have just danced us beautifully into the next question. And I love the questions that are being posed right now about a transformation dance. What is it to dance in an apocalypse? What is it to listen through the voices of artists, right? So as we are taking the places we've just gone to and trying to stay in them, but being mindful of the past, as Claudia has reiterated for us, what does 2021 maybe have to give up in order for us to really move into 2035, right? There's a lot that is, and I'm thinking of this not in the linear time, right? If we're checking forward against the clock, but that noting that 2035 and 2021 are bound up in multiple timescapes that are intersecting. Yeah. So what of 2035 do we want to take along with us? What in that transformation dance is that we're saying yes to? And then what of maybe 2034 and back, are we going to go ahead and leave, right? So what do we have to give up, or what has to be released in our previous timescapes to be in this 2035 that we desire? What do we need to leave? And I'm watching hands raising, Kevin, then Linda.
Yeah, so this is Kevin. One of the things that I feel like I've become really attuned to in the last year is like styles of beginning. Like, how do we begin? And it could be kind of anything, but I guess I'm really, really curious about like kind of scenes of like institutional beginning, right? You begin a meeting, you begin a panel. And I have thought a lot about whether we need an entirely different style of beginning. And I wonder if sometimes we are not letting the future come through because right at the beginning, we're already delimiting forms of possibility. Like, I wonder about an agenda, you know what I mean? And I wonder about techniques that usually, and we need to collaborate, especially across time and space, but that sometimes when you begin and it lays out a form, it just propagates a whole bunch of silences from the beginning. And I think one of the things that I learned from disability justice organizers is about beginning with your access needs, which sounds, maybe it kind of sounds like easy, but I have thought of this as really actually the most complicated and important work that I do. First of all, in naming my access needs, because it brings into the world like a whole universe of sensation that, you know, we often are trying to sort out in silence and actually not recognize. But then if you think about organizing around what everyone in a space needs at that particular moment, you find the agenda by what is emerging at that moment. And you're not actually limiting from the beginning what could happen. And so I wonder if to get to these incredible dreams of 2035, we just start differently, you know? And I think that's kind of what we're talking about, starting again, but not just starting again to start something, but starting in a whole new aesthetic and a whole new like formal sense.
Hi. I just kept nodding my head the whole time you were talking. So I think something that my company and we have been talking a lot about in 2020, is what is normal. Because people, especially people in the performing arts or audience, are like, we want to go back to normal, right? But we're like, no, we don't want to go back to what was normal, because what was normal was not working for a lot of us, and what we noticed that we started talking about since 2017 was decolonization. And what does that mean, right? And I remember 2019, we went to the Indigenous people's gathering on Randall's Island, and Auntie Pua Case, one of the Native Hawaiian activists, was like, the best way to decolonize is to re-indigenize. Because we have been talking about decolonization, but what does that mean? What does it mean for white supremacy to be removed? What produced white supremacy, right? What does a decolonized world look like? Because for most of us, we have never seen it, right? Even growing up in Hawaii, where honestly, like people of Asian and Pacific Islander heritage, we were the majority of people, but we were still living in a very white supremacist system, right? Even though, like, I want to say BIPOC people were like, I think 90-something% of the population. And so we started talking, particularly last year, because so much has happened and we needed to heal. So I remember Ahimsa, earlier we were talking about taking care of ourselves. So what does decolonizing healing look like? What does decolonizing resource sharing look like? Because, I honestly just spent a whole week writing grants. I had never spent so many hours writing grants. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm gonna get these grants. I don't know if these honestly, mostly white foundations are gonna think of my grant proposal, if they will understand it. because the fact is only 8% of the grants are given to people of color, right? So I think in 2021, we have to actively understand what decolonization look like. And what my company have done is so for the last 10 years, we've worked with our Sekou Haru, who's one of the house dance pioneer. We've worked with a lot of pioneers in the house and hip hop community, but also my kumu hula, who's my hula teacher and who's also a Hawaiian healer. So we have a spiritual healer in the dance company, because we recognize that it's so important when we talk about decolonizing and re-indigenizing. It's so important to really look at what Indigenous people have done to survive, to thrive, and for Hawaiians especially. So I'm not native Hawaiian, right? So I'm just speaking on what I've learned from my kumu hula, is that hula, for example, the dance, the chant, the lineage is what really kept the culture going. You know, when the kingdom was stolen by US military and business people, when Hawaiian was banned, when hula was banned, people kept practicing hula anyway, even if it's as a source of entertainment or whatever it is, but hula really kept the culture together. And then a lot of people are using it to really, in the 80s when I was growing up in Hawaii, that was where the cultural renaissance was happening because of hula. Because of hula, that's also the documentation of a people's history, culture, language. And then that's how people, or non-Hawaiians like me, got into the culture and really fully understood like what happened besides what was introduced to us in the textbooks. So I think 2021, what we need to get rid of is the way we even perform and create dance. It needs to go back to how our ancestors have always created dance. It's not for the stage, it's for healing. It's for ourselves. It's so we can tell our stories to our children, grandchildren, and 7 generations from now.
Thank you for that. Any other thoughts about what of this world? And there's probably many things that we could name that feel or that are just incongruent with these worlds that we're working towards, so that they can get named and hopefully invoked in a way that marks forward their erasure.
Yeah, I actually thinking about the cultural vocabulary. I think we have to. This is when I talk about this year, about the year of like a chance, transformative year, is by even starting our own practicing, changing that. So, and I make a list of things that are happening now, actually. So February 2021, and I list that, I've been in different meetings. So, and I think these are like probably just a good beginning. Like number one, having funders open up universal grant applications so everybody can get in, like the 501(c)(3) system, not required for individual or independent artist organizations, or like to focus on the quantification of values and not numbers, more into human experiences, like when you have to report back, you have to report like the depth of the impact of you as an artist, your dance presentation with your community, and to like change the relationship between the cultural organizations with independent producers like me or artists, and see this as a collaboration, not like it's a collaboration. The contracts and budgets that are considered ethic documents, is like how you distribute the wealth, how you approach the, it's not like you are saying about the meetings, Kevin, it's you are kind of like totally limited when you come with a list of things that you have to follow. You are not given the opportunity to a dialogue. and to have conversations instead of negotiations with people that are working together, you know, and to change the word of presenting for the word of sharing, you know. I think these 7, to me, I've been like in different meetings, and to me, these are like the practices, my own practices that I want to start applying to be part of this changing behavior because this is the opportunity we have, you know. This is, I think it's a transformative, chaotic time where is the time to then
Thank you, Claudia. You cut off a little bit for me. I'm not sure if that happened for other people. I apologize, I wasn't spaced out. Ahimsa, you have your hand raised. I'm calling you, and I'm going to fix the light, but I can hear everyone.
Thank you. This is Ahimsa speaking. Briefly, like I think as soon as you were talking about 2021 into 2035, I thought of, you know, new lives being born, and what would that 14-year-old or set of 14-year-olds, where would they be? And what would they be needing, and what would need to be transformed so that there could be new life possibilities that aren't just deepening of the apocalyptic, like leading health indicators for so many of our intersectional communities. And so I think when we're thinking about the arts, when we're thinking about dance, performance, movement, thinking about like, what does it mean for our bodies, our nations, our communities to be free, to be supported, to be resourced, to be re-territorialized in sovereign ways, and to really think about, you know, not just what are the shows that might be in the future, or what might be the venue spaces, or what might be those things, but, you know, if children of color are being pipelined into a prison industrial complex and are having their lives threatened and are not having food access and are not having very basic things that, if we're thinking about the New York City area, the tri-state area, New York State, the Northeast, and throughout the US and throughout Turtle Island and throughout the world, like what are the very real things that limit movement and the development of bodies that will be moving? And so I think just in terms of nativity and indigeneity and sovereignty, like organizations need to move a hell of a lot farther than just doing line acknowledgement statements, you know? And I feel like what is the commitment that New York City, tri-state and New York State arts organizations and organizations, period, are making to the federally recognized tribal communities that exist within their boundaries? And like, do you have any connection with Shinnecock? Do you have any connection with Tonawanda? Do you have any connection with Ganajohalege upstate? Do you have any connection? And in each organization will have its own mission or geographic focus. So if it's like New York City communities, you know, are you doing anything to keep the American Indian Community House alive? You know, it was founded in 1969, the same year as Stonewall, same year as, you know, Third World Strikes that founded ethnic studies on the West Coast. A very vibrant, you know, what are people doing to support actual Native communities when they're not reading their land acknowledgement statement for your performance series? So what are you doing to actually like improve Native lives so those bodies could continue to perform and be well compensated? And I think really to be thinking about that, like not just on individual artists, but really what are the relationships you're forming to actual tribal nations within whatever your geographic conceptualization of the space you work with is. So if you're a New York State organization, there are multiple federal nations that exist, whether they're out on Long Island, whether they're north part of the state. If you're a tri-state organization, you've got federal and state recognized tribal communities from New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. You know, you have also urban, multiracial, diasporic Native communities. But particularly to be thinking about tribal nations, I think is really important. And what is the work you're doing to support? And another thing with that, and I'll wrap up, and there's so many other things, is there's a real violence that I think is occurring when Langston Hughes wrote, you know, a century ago when the Negro was in vogue, you know, and thinking about how indigeneity is in vogue perhaps now. Do you know what I'm saying? And people are wanting, various non-Native organizations are fighting Native organizations for funding and really doing some egregious things that are very laterally violent to Native communities, and are often bringing in people who might be Indigenous, but are often global Indigenous folk or folk who are from outside the territories of the Northeast or the New York City area. And while that work is valid, that work should only be done once you've already been doing work to support local Native communities and their survival. And if you are not doing that and you are skipping way far ahead to bring in folk from Australia, from Aotearoa, which are valid, important international Indigenous connections, but you are not doing anything with Mashantucket Pequot, you are not doing anything with Mohawks, you are not doing anything also with displaced Lenape, where there are federal bans both in Oklahoma, also up in Canada, also relocated to Wisconsin. So if you are not doing work to support local Native communities, why are you looking 3,000 miles away, 7,000 miles away for Native people when you are failing the Native communities that are local for you? And the super last thing I'll say is to be thinking about what communities of color are invisibilized all the time. And oftentimes there's a litany of Asian, Black, Latino, Asian, Black, Latino, Asian, Black, Latino, and Indigenous Pacific folk, Native North American folk, and Arab Middle Eastern folk are continually erased. And so to be really thinking about what are the gaps in your organizations, in your staffing structures, your funding streams, and to really think about how you need to impact New York bodies of color so that we, in these increasingly gentrifying times, are not forced out of territory. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Claudia.
Yeah, I want to add to Ahimsa's comment about land acknowledgement, because I think it's important to really learn and study and research deeply on where we are. To me as an immigrant coming to Jackson Heights, I would like to reach out to the local, indigenous communities here and ask them how they would like to get acknowledged. When I'm here, like speaking to you, what is the correct way to acknowledge? And not just to look at Google, which is talking about reproducing structures and use like a source of like a dominant way of thinking, So I think when I to your point, I totally agree with you. I've been in a couple of meetings too, where a person has to do a land acknowledgement because the local indigenous leader asked them not to do it because that doesn't benefit that coming us to do land acknowledgement here. It doesn't really get to them the benefit of this. So finding really getting that benefit and that inclusion into the conversation and our practices, our own very practices, I think we are still on time to just go into that direction. And another thing to me is when I think into my land acknowledgement coming from Mexico, I live in a place where there was a huge civilization that it was built about oppressing and displacing others and using, labor as slavery. All these fantastic pyramids that the Aztecs and the Mayans had built are also based on forced labor and displacement of others. So it goes like really about really what is the work of bringing those voices and not being us. It's to invite them to the room, basically. to be with us and teach us how to do it properly?
Thank you, Claudia. I gave you all panelists, I'm lifting the veil for folks who are watching this question that literally said something about absences and invisibilities, ellipses. And I knew that when we got into the room, I would have an understanding of what that might need to be for this conversation. And where we've just moved to, I'm thinking about, so firstly, to kind of anchor us in thinking of like, what is your work? Like, what are you here to do? What are you doing, right? And maybe in an African Indigenous context, we would say like, what is your ashe? And so if you can kind of follow me through the threads of how I'm thinking about this. So, what are the perhaps invisibilities and absences in the practices that you're engaged in, right? So when we think of what is your work, the forms that we practice, the spaces where we practice, who is not there. Some of that, all of that has its systemic and institutional undergirding. How are we moving that work forward? Thinking of our 2035, but in getting specific into how are we uplifting in this 2035 movement what maybe now would be considered an absence or an invisibility. So that might be about the lack of action with acknowledgement. That could be a lack of access. That could be a lack of multiplicity with regard to race, place, gender, body. So as, again, just to maybe say that a bit more succinctly. So all of that is in the mix of this question that's messy, but I think the thing of it is to be in the mess for me of that. So what is your work in it? What is your work in moving us into this 2035 as we are acknowledging the absences and invisibilities? That easy sunshine of a question I'm posing to you all.
Can I speak?
Yeah.
This is Perel. I just wanted to share a little bit about my work in Germany because it connects to this question, even if it's like working from the present backward, I think it will like find its way around to the future. I don't know what I just did with time. But something I'm investigating here is the history of the extermination of disabled people. That is something that started to occur as one of the first attempts at mass murder before World War II, which was then instrumentalized and which was also used for other groups. And this occurred at the beginning and then during and then even after World War II, in which thousands, hundreds of thousands of disabled people were killed. And this is not a history that I grew up learning about. And it's something that I found out about through a disabled colleague here. And then I went about to go to some of these killing sites in the region and uncover this history, which is a part of my performance work now. But really, as I'm uncovering it, I'm thinking about how I didn't grow up with any disability history at all. And when you look at the way disabled people are treated universally, the history of institutionalization in America, it's unbelievable to me that we don't know our own history And what does it mean to carry an identity of which you don't know its history? How can you say I am this when each generation you have to reinvent what this means? And so for me, it's about being able to uncover that so that we don't have to start each generation looking back into an erasure, that we can actually name things and people and places. And part of that has to do with being able to imagine a history of lives that we don't know and can't know, which definitely relates to many other identities that have been oppressed. And there's an ethics to doing that as well, because you can't speak for people. So then it's sort of like through my body, I have to be able to imagine other bodies like mine and how they fought, how they resisted. And so just even if it's a fantasy, so that I'm not starting from zero. And so there's something too about being rooted to a place out of pain versus out of territoriality or ownership. And what it means to inherit a history out of pain. And that there's a power in that. And that that needs to somehow be what is carried into 2035. I think that I'm going to end there for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Perel. Linda.
Thank you. This is Linda speaking. Building on what Perel said, understanding history, right? And really understanding, connecting, finding, doing the research, exploring, all of that, honestly, I feel like it's going to be a lifetime's work and probably many more lifetimes, especially history of people who have been oppressed, right? So speaking again about our company's work in terms of re-indigenizing, decolonizing. So it all stemmed from 2017 when everything was happening on our border, when children were being locked up. And the conversation really started as like an immigrant experience. And we hosted an open rehearsal, invited immigrant choreographers in, from New York City, and like, what is your immigrant experience, right? And then also really exploring the definition of immigrant, like who are immigrants? And then the conversation just kept going back to racism, and then it kept going back to like my dancers of European ancestry. If they're from like Europe, they can very much be like, I'm from Greece and this is my culture. I'm from Spain, this is my culture, right? But the European Americans, right? They didn't feel like they could contribute to the conversation because what is white culture? And then I can't speak for them, but then where do they even begin researching? So throughout the last like 3 years, my dancers have really, including myself, are really finding out a lot of things like history about ourselves that we never even thought about. Because how are we going to continue having conversations about decolonization when we don't even know who we are, when we are so disconnected from our ancestors? So throughout the process, 2 of my dancers actually found out they are Native Americans and they never even knew about it until they started talking to a family about the history. So now they're trying to dig in more to learn more. So I think, yeah, definitely going back to our history and then opening up the creative process. So it's not just always dancers talking among ourselves. What we're really trying to do is to engage the community, because our community is our best resource, right? So one of the project we're working on now is called Edible Tales, which is food-based dance exploration. So we're talking about all different topics, like food-related topics, and inviting and actively reaching out to non-dance organizations to come in and join us in the creative process. One challenge I would say I'm having, and that echoes with Ahimsa's, what Ahimsa said last time for the previous question, was working with the indigenous population here in New York. In Hawaii, maybe it's because I grew up there, I have better access to Native Hawaiians. And also because Native Hawaiian culture, language, voices are, there's being a renaissance, right? So it's in the forefront. We're in a co-working space called Vai Vai. Vai Vai means wealth. In Hawaiian, Vai just means freshwater. So when you have a lot of fresh water, that means wealth. So we're really decolonizing the way we share wealth, how we collaborate. In New York City though, it's taken me a year to try to set up even just some sort of workshop collaboration with an indigenous organization. So I think access barrier is definitely there. And that's, something I need to reflect and work on. And then another thing, just talking about funding, right? How organizations are funded. A lot of times the work we feel like we're pressured to create, what do we need to present on stage? What will look good on Lincoln Center? Because that's where I want my company to perform eventually. What would they bring on that stage? So I think just kind of decolonizing all of that idea of what performances should look like, who should be performing, and going back to connecting with our histories and our ancestors. How do we go about doing that?
Linda, could you talk a little bit more? I'm curious about this for everyone, but because you named house and I'm a house head, I'm curious about how you do this. And as you're thinking about honoring our histories within our different practices, right? So this is definitely a question for everyone. Within our different practices, how are you honoring the ancestors in the forms that you're working within? Right. So I think a lot about the decolonization and re-indigenizing as that relation to cultivating those relationships, those liberated relationships with ancestors. So those in our bloodlines and those maybe in the bloodlines of our various forms, right? Context of dance and performance today. But do you all have a practice of how you are engaging with the ancestors of your various practices? Yeah, and if so, what are those? And maybe how can folks re-indigenize them, make them more accessible and liberated? Ahimsa?
Thank you. This is Ahimsa speaking. It's actually really beautiful because you laid it up to anticipate what I was already going to be speaking about too, in some ways, based upon what others have shared and what you'd asked previously. For me, this may be a strange thing to say, but I've always loved artists more than art. I've loved individual people, and I've always been much more concerned and invested, how is this dancer doing, rather than what's the brilliance of their next performance, and are they eating, are they okay, and so for me, one of the things that's an absence, I feel, that is that I think people have hopefully been being more mindful of this year, with all the different crises going on, is to really check in and think about who are those people that we're not seeing as vibrantly as we may have in the past, in certain spaces, and what are we doing to recenter and amplify and include and listen to and lovingly check in. I feel like there are so many elders who have done such amazing work who are oftentimes invisibilized nowadays or are only thought of occasionally. And also various people who, for a variety of reasons, have maybe not been pursuing their artistic passions as fully as they would have wanted to for survival reasons, and to then be asked back into creative space. So for example, here in Oklahoma, because I go back and forth between New York and Oklahoma, but approaching Native women dancers who are here who have not danced publicly in over 10 years and asking them to work with me, and just as I was getting to know them and being oh my goodness, we have to do movement work together. This is going to be amazing. And them loving it and being able to share that experience of coming back into public performance and sharing of space with each other. And also asking other Native folk here locally in greater Tulsa, Oklahoma, to be doing movement work, even if they haven't been recognized as movers in that way. And so I think continually thinking about, I was also thinking about the historical work and like in terms of In Search of Our Mother's Gardens and Alice Walker's important work in that essay and book, and the need to like rethink the categories of art making or of what artist is or creativity is. And so I think that these ways in which we can find each other again and lovingly check in, like, who's the person you haven't talked to recently or haven't seen, and how are they? And also, how can we create opportunities for people to move with each other again in powerful ways and supported ways?
Thank you for that. I'm thinking about care. I'm thinking about Kevin's grocery store dance and that club, and like we're all, not many of us are in the club right now, but who's in the 2035 club, who's up in that space? And yeah, how do we cultivate that to be, what does that look like? How do we cultivate that to be different than the clubs maybe of our past selves? You have moved us into a question I wasn't sure we'd have time to, but so I'm going to jump on the Ahimsa train of thinking about this. What I think I wrote it as Dansfield's kind of obsession with border culture, right? So and bordering of place, bordering in terms of categorization, bordering in terms of what's been brought up already about competition and scarcity models, right? So a lot of that is about a white supremacist organizational practice of categorization and a reductive politic, right? So I'm curious for this room, as in our future selves that we're moving into now. And Perel, I think you spoke it just brilliantly of what is it called? The Association for the Advancement of Creative Musicians. Their kind of tagline is ancient to the future. So this, idea that we can go far enough into our history to somehow end up on the other side, right? So we are moving backwards and forward simultaneously. So as we are moving in whichever direction we choose to invoke, how do we dismantle, or what are some strategies, what are some dreams around the dismantling of the border culture that creates divisions and invisibilities for so many of us? Yeah.
I could start again.
Perel.
This is Perel speaking. Yeah, I feel like something that I want to say to everyone, like everyone in our communities and in our worlds, and the powers that be that fund and build those worlds, is like, do you know a disabled person? Do you know a disabled artist? If you know that person or artist, do you interact with them? Do you know anything about how they live their lives? And in asking that, I also ask, like, if the answer is no, then how do you then have the power to make a decision that affects their lives, either by depriving them of the resources that they need in order to live, or devaluing their aesthetics, or completely not acknowledging their aesthetics? And also, how can you be available to the future if you can't even see what is happening right in front of you, or if you can't even understand what is occurring in front of you or around you? Those are the questions that I have. And it echoes back to a few times Linda has brought up the issue of funders and applying for things, and these things that many of us have to do to further our work, which in itself is a privilege. But these structures are not meant to include us. And so what do we do in order to redefine these boundaries so that we are including ourselves in the process of demanding ourselves to be included or given not only to be included, because actually I have a very hard time with the word inclusion, with seeing it everywhere, with seeing it as part of official titles. Because what if I, who have not been included, don't even want to be included in your bullshit world? What if I want to be over here and make a world with everyone else who has not been included in your world, you know? And what if we ourselves can gather the resources that we need without you? That's my party. So I know, yeah, go, yeah.
No. Finish, bro.
No, that's, I mean, I have a tendency when I'm dreaming to really, really dream out there, you know, and then I think, oh, I should come back and I should speak to that power structure, and I should deliver a lexicon so that the power structure can dance with me or something, but it's not really at the base of my desires. And when I think of like a baby crip or a young disabled kid who could become an artist, I don't want that kid to have to think about that either. I want that kid to think, I can do what I want, and I can find that support, and I can have that with others. That's all.
This is Kevin. I just was dreaming with you there. So yeah, there's so much that you said that activated stuff that I think about a lot. I'm really, really interested in the nonprofit industrial complex, and like, especially right now, like what is happening. But I think, you know, when we're thinking about boundary work and border work, one of the questions that comes up for me is how we take direction from movement work, like in kind of both senses of that term, like movement, meaning the physical body and motion and things that are always in motion, but also like movement work, like the movement for racial justice. And I think one of the seductive boundary producing mechanisms in so many places is a nonprofit industrial complex that confuses particular organizations and particular people, particular moments with movement. You know, like I think it's so often when we're in grant writing mode or whatever that we think like this is the work, like I have to describe it, like this is it. And I think it's like, I think for us to really know what our work is, we have to seek direction from things that are not like propagating all of these borders and boundaries all the time, you know? And so I just personally, that's what I am so curious about. How do I take direction from movement, not from particular organizational forms that are often confused for the movement. And I just, yeah, I thought that really, what you were talking about, Perel, really activated that for me. So thank you.
Claudia, as a presenter, how do these ideas resonate for you? Because you are a part of the folks who are making lots of changes and difference and seeing what's not there, but you're moving. I see you in the way that you talk about your work as someone who is paying a lot of attention to movement work as a curator and as an organizer, arts administrator. Can you talk a bit about how these issues are resonating for you in the work that you do?
Yeah, no, I think, as I said, to me is how you start a conversation about creativity, how you invite those voices into a room and establish that conversation. I think if you come to, I think the word collaboration, that's why I even put like kind of like points and kind of like a vocabulary about what the lexicon that we have to start using, you know? So for instance, to me, if we think about an artist as somebody who is not bringing a global concept, has a capacity to really come and bring a global language where ethnicity, racial, I mean, that really is not the point, but it's about the being able to communicate with people from whatever the part of the world, whatever your language is, of the color of your skin, but to be able to create something. And we are the facilitators of those spaces where once we facilitate that space, we step back, we leave artists to collaborate, and then we are a support system for them to be able to do, I mean, to finalize it the way they want. That's why I think it's very important to change the way we value or we evaluate what is a good dance performance, which is the right cultural organization. You know, we have to start here, but by changing our goals. You know, I don't think a dance company is going to be a good dance company if they're going to perform in a wide established cultural institution. That's not the measure of success. To me, a success is that I was able to provide a space where people were able to sit, to share their ideas, and to move and create maybe just that, maybe a conversation, you know, maybe just a dialogue. But to me, that's very important, that we change the evaluation system. And and that's pretty much what I was referring when I gave my list about pretty much, you know, considering the quantification values and having the human experience as the goal. You know, if you happen to have a residency for 2 months and you were able to come up with like 5 minutes of movement and a beautiful poem, that's it. That's fantastic. You know, that's, you know, so I think to me, that's a practice that I want to create. I want to create access also when a little bit about what is considered the work of others other places to change this concept, because to Ahimsa's point, why not to bring that artist from Australia, that indigenous artist from Australia? Why not? You know, so, but it's like not to leave the other thing with no attention, you know, but that doesn't mean that we should stop doing the other thing. So to me, it's like, when we think about, I mean, I probably, from the place that I come, I grew up fascinated by Chinese opera and by Malcolm X and by so many different things. And right now, that's New York. That's why I'm here in New York. And that's why I'm in Jackson Heights, where the public schools had identified 162 different languages. They speak 662 different languages at the public schools here. So to me, that's what is moving us to a better future. You know, the more that we know, the more that we learn from others, the more that we learn to listen and to provide space to others to be heard. That's, to me, kind of like my motto, and that's why I don't call myself a presenter. You know, I call myself a collaborator. You know, because and that's the type of vocabulary that I would like to change. It's starting with me. I don't see myself as that, because also I don't run an organization, because I'm an independent person. So I generate the spaces wherever I am, geographically, spirituality, or, you know. So the idea is to generate those spaces, those exchange and collaborative spaces. That's pretty much.
Thank you for that, and for making sure that you are seen and spoken about in the way that you want, in a way that is empowered. So thank you for that. Ahimsa, you have your hand raised.
Thank you. This is Ahimsa. Something that I've been thinking about, like in terms of these notion of borders and boundaries and margins, is like this: the perceived margins of the privilege are often the centers of the oppressed. And like in that way, like this thing where like supposedly like, is there any there? We're often doing amazing things, you know, and people are just sort of like, we didn't realize that there are all these indigenous, you know, queer folk with disabilities doing all this phenomenal work, or that there's all these people. And so I think one of the things that people can really do to support our survivals and our vibrancy and our creativity is to be like, how can you prioritize those perspectives that come from within those centers of what you think are margins and boundaries and borders, and fund that so that people can have that internal dialogue with their own communities in that vibrancy, you know? Because then it's not so much about, oh, we have no idea why we can't find people who do this kind of work. It's like, no, we are doing stuff. You are having a temporal spatial disjunct right now due to your privileged positioning, and you're seeing it from all the way out here, and you don't know that we've got all this amazing stuff going on. We're doing it vibrantly. We're doing it in skilled ways. We're having deep dialogues. We've been doing it before you even arrived on this continent. So the ways in which this functions is, I think, just really that is like the people's perceived boundaries and borders and margins are actually the centers of the oppressed, and that there's vibrant work going on in them, and to prioritize those internal dialogues that are occurring within those spaces so that queer, trans, like disabled artists of color can like have dialogues with each other, produce work with each other, can hold space, critique a million different things. Similarly, like on almost all of the intersections I'm thinking about, like I know there's people doing that work, and it always baffles me when people don't know that that exists or are almost in shock. And it's like, no, that's just your positioning vis-a-vis privilege rather than coming from within the center of that experience. And you can prioritize those centered experiences of those communities instead. That would actually be radical and transformative.
I just love, there aren't enough like heart emojis to to communicate how much I love what you just said. I've been like in jest, but in all seriousness, saying a lot these days of like what the nonprofit industrial complex and white supremacist organizational culture can do for people right now is give the money, give up the seats, and get out of the way. So if that is the thing that we are moving into 2035 to do as we're closing, because we have moved in a direction that has happened, what have you done with that coin, with that room, with that seat, with what has, again, what has been left for you? So what have you done with it? Name one thing. You don't got to give up your secrets, because people watch these things and then go do programming, so don't have to do that. But name a thing that you have done with the coin that has been given up in this 2035.
Hi, I'm gonna just go. I'm Linda. So something that we've kind of gotten rid of for the company is auditions. We no longer have any auditions since I think 2016, because we realized it's created a lot of barriers for people who can't honestly just afford taking a full day off of work to go to an audition they might not get a job for. And I think our intention is also to change the way we create, because we no longer want dancers to only have the gig mentality, but rather think of dance as a way to really build communities and companies. So what we've done is we have open rehearsals where when a company is not performing, we just invite dancers to come to rehearsals. You don't have to pay anything, just come and dance with the company, understand what we do. And if our purposes align, then you join the company as family. So that's something that we've gotten rid of in terms of our decolonization practice, to not have auditions.
This is Kevin. One thing that I'm trying to work on right now that I hope by 2035 is like a thing and is widely known is how to produce joy through vigilance. Because for me, so often I think hypervigilance is actually what's working, and I call it vigilance, but it's probably actually like too much or whatever, and it just destroys my joy. And it feels like I'm producing all of these binaries that actually maybe we don't have to choose. And so I hope to leave evidence of a method or whatever for producing joy through vigilance. And for me, a lot of that is partying and practicing access techniques through partying and keeping us safe in a way that guarantees the possibility of joy.
What you doing with your coin, Claudia?
I think to create a hub, a space, could be, and that's part of your creative thinking, where we can share knowledge, resources, and that I can be speaking 162 languages and being able to communicate and to probably be able to dance with all of you and to share a choreography with your beautiful canes, and also be able to be received into your worlds, because that's if we find a place where we share that, I'm gonna have access to your world as well, and I'm looking and working on how we can create a space with no doors, you know, like an open space so people can come in and out. And as you come in, you learn and you share whatever you learn in other space. So that's kind of like my 235 direction.
Ahimsa, Perel.
For me, I would say like the thing that's been bringing me so much joy and that I want to continue and is given for me. I was raised by my three moms, my mother, my grandmother, my godmother, and the women of my community. And I'm just used to hanging out with elders. And so hanging out particularly with like queer women of color elders. And that's the most lit evening I can think of in so many ways, is to be like, I'm so blessed to know so many people who have done the work, are continuing to do the work, and are reflecting on their lives. And that's where to go forward, I think we have to look back and also be mindful of the amazing, still ongoing brilliance and creativity and fierceness of our elders who are still very much with us. And that's where I want to see us, is about, you know, there's a bunch of different queer women of color who haven't had books out since the 90s and are still with us on this earth, you know, and other people in a variety of various artistic forms. And I'm like, can we bring our queer elders of color, trans elders of color into center and create vibrant spaces so that we can bask in the wonder that is them and that is us.
Yeah, I was going to say something along the same lines about intergenerational space sharing, because for me, I feel like I didn't have that for such a long time as a young, like a, you know, like as a young one trying to navigate so many things, and it's something I've been able to access at like a later point in my life, and now I feel like I don't know how much longer some people will be in my life. So it's like I want to celebrate them and elevate them as much as possible while they're still here. I want to know what they feel they have received and feel like they haven't. But then as well, I feel like I'm witnessing a younger generation of people who are brilliant in so many ways that I never knew I could even do when I was their age. And so it's also just about like inviting more of that. And maybe like for me, and in the ways that I've learned how to work as an artist, to just like break down the hierarchies that I have navigated or thought was necessary, and to like see what somebody wants and just be like, you should have that now. Do it now. Because we don't know like if you'll be around in the future, how soon that is. And so, yeah, that.
Thank you all for all of this and for leaving us in such a beautiful, tender, inspired place. I'm grateful for this room and grateful for the opportunity to have come together with you all. I've learned a great deal, and I hope we continue to cultivate this circle of learning however we may. Thank you to Dance NYC any mic drops, parting words? Can we like unmute and just have a little messy audio moment? To say goodbye, please.
Yes, sí.
Ah!
Yeah,
Thank you.
Epa!
friends. Gritar, bailar.
This has been so lovely.
Thank you, Nycha, Whitson, and thank you to our wonderful group of speakers, Ahimsa, Timoteo, Bodhrán, Claudia Norman, Kevin Gotkin, and Linda Kou and Perel for today's insightful conversation. Achepa todos. To our attendees, thank you for being avid contributors and offering your insight in all ways. And a final thank you to our sponsors, to Erica Cook of Biscardi Center, captioner from Biscardi Center, and Brandon Kazin-Maddox and Candice Davider from LC Interpreting Services for their invaluable support. We're heading over to the session follow-up chat in the community section to take a few questions and wrap up the conversation. So what's next? Tomorrow, you can continue to experience the symposium. Visit our sponsors in the exhibitor hall, create virtual meetups and online conversations at our community board. Message other attendees and engage with symposium thematic guides in the digital program book. We hope you will keep the conversations going. Tag us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and use the hashtag DanceSymp, DANCESYMP. Buenas noches, good night, y achepa todos.
Thank you for joining today's sessions. A special thanks to our funders, the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, the Howard Gilman Foundation, the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, the New York State Council on the Arts, and the National Endowment for the Arts. A special thanks to our lead sponsor, Con Edison, and our lead dance advocate, Jody Gottfried Arnhold. Subsidies for the education and dance worker ticket tiers are made possible by the Arnhold Foundation. A special thanks to our host and partner level sponsors, Nell Shelby Productions, Gibney, In the Lights, and New York Live Arts. A special thanks to our sponsors and exhibitors. Please visit them on our website, the HOVA homepage, and the exhibitor hall. And last, but certainly not least, a special thanks to our justice, equity, and inclusion partners, Art Beyond Sight, Art Space Sanctuary, Asian American Arts Alliance, Center for Traditional Music and Dance, Indo-American Arts Council, the International Association of Blacks in Dance, Lotus Music and Dance, Museum Arts and Culture Access Consortium, National Association of Latino Arts and Culture, New York Foundation for the Arts, and Women of Color in the Arts. Stay connected with us by posting your takeaways on social media using the hashtags DanceSymp, DanceNYC 2021, and DanceSymp 2021. How are we doing? Did you like the session? Use the like feature on your favorite session. Got feedback for us? Take the post-event survey after March 20th and tell us how we did. Need help? Email us at customerservice@dance.nyc. A special thanks to our video asset and streaming partners, Renegade Performance Group, Full Out Creative, and Nell Shelby Productions. Thanks for joining. Keep in touch at dance.nyc.